What if I told you that Princess Diana had a secret so shocking it could have destroyed the monarchy? For 4 years, the world's most famous woman was living a double life. Every Tuesday, she vanished from the palace. No bodyguards, no staff, no witnesses. She was preparing for something so dangerous, so forbidden, that when she finally revealed it, 2,500 people gasped in unison. On December 23, 1985, at the Royal Opera House, Diana did something that made Prince Charles freeze in horror and caused 8 standing ovations. 3 minutes that changed everything. If you're obsessed with Diana's untold secrets like I am, smash that subscribe button and hit the bell, because I reveal the hidden truth behind every headline. You won't believe what really happened behind those palace walls. Let's expose the truth. 2022, Shropshire, England, 25 years after Paris. Inspector Ken Wharf sat in his quiet study, surrounded by photographs that told the story of the most extraordinary years of his career. For 25 years, he had kept his most devastating secrets locked away. But now, on the exact anniversary of Princess Diana's death, he was finally ready to break his silence with revelations that would shake the very foundations of the British monarchy. As Diana's personal protection officer from 1987 to 1993, Wharf had been more than just a bodyguard. He had been her confidant, her protector, and the keeper of secrets that could have toppled governments. In those crucial 6 years, he had watched the fairy tale marriage crumble, witnessed Diana's desperate search for love, and uncovered truths about the royal family that had never been spoken aloud. Princess Diana trusted him with her innermost secrets during the most traumatic years of her marriage to Prince Charles, and he was at her side as she plotted to escape from what she believed was the gilded cage of the royal family, the official records stated. But what they didn't reveal was the true extent of what Diana had confided to the man she called Uncle Ken. Wharf had carried the weight of these secrets through decades of criticism and accusations. He had been called a traitor by some, a sellout by others, all because he had dared to publish his memoir, Diana, Closely Guarded Secret, in 2002. But that book, he now realized, had barely scratched the surface of what he really knew. The Scotland Yard elite officer had been trained by the SAS and selected to protect the Queen's grandchildren, but nothing could have prepared him for the role he would play in Diana's life. In charge of the princess's around-the-clock security at home and abroad, in public and private, Ken Wharf became a close friend and loyal confidant who shared her most private moments. For nearly 7 years, Wharf had shadowed Diana through the most tumultuous period of her life. He had been there during her secret affairs, her battles with bulimia, her desperate phone calls to married men, and her increasingly erratic behavior as her marriage to Charles disintegrated. He had watched her transform from a shy young bride into the world's most famous woman, and he had seen the price she paid for that fame. But there were secrets he had never shared, revelations so explosive that even now, 25 years later, they could destroy reputations, end careers, and fundamentally alter the public's understanding of the woman they called the People's Princess. The decision to speak out fully hadn't come easily. Wharf had endured years of attacks from royal supporters who accused him of betraying Diana's trust. No member of the royal family ever contacted me to say they were pissed off, he had said defiantly in earlier interviews. 1 or 2 police officers through the media threatened to halt the book and deny me of my pension and whatever. Of course, none of these things ever happened. But the criticism had stung, particularly from William and Harry, who were known to be disgusted by the torrent of revelations the book contained. The thought that the 2 young princes he had once protected, who had affectionately called him Uncle Ken, now saw him as a traitor had haunted him for decades. Now, however, Wharf felt compelled to reveal everything. Recent events had convinced him that the full truth needed to be told, regardless of the consequences. The royal family's carefully constructed narrative about Diana was beginning to crumble anyway, and he possessed information that could accelerate that collapse exponentially. "All I did was write a memoir," he had said years earlier in his defense. "The whole point of a memoir is that you have to write it as it was." And sometimes that's not always what people want to hear. But his original memoir, he now admitted, had been sanitized, edited, and carefully crafted to protect certain individuals and institutions. This time would be different. This time he would hold nothing back. As he prepared to make the most controversial revelations of his career, Worf knew that once these words were spoken, there would be no going back. The secrets he was about to reveal would not just shock the public. They would fundamentally change how history remembered the Princess of Wales and the institution she had tried so desperately to escape. The man who had protected Diana's body was about to expose the truth that would destroy her carefully crafted legend forever. 1988-1993, Following Diana into the Heart of Darkness. What Ken Worf witnessed during his years protecting Princess Diana went far beyond the public scandals that made headlines. As her constant shadow, he had access to conversations, meetings, and private moments that revealed the true extent of the royal family's desperation to control a woman who was rapidly spinning beyond their reach. Diana felt the royals were jealous of her fame and believed certain members of the royal family were sharpening their knives against her. Worf had testified during the inquest into Diana's death, but what he hadn't revealed was the specific evidence he had gathered of this campaign against the princess, evidence that painted a picture of systematic psychological warfare designed to break her spirit. During one particularly devastating conversation in 1991, Diana had confided to Worf her growing certainty that the palace was actively working to destroy her reputation. "They want me gone, Ken," she had told him during a private moment at Kensington Palace. "But they can't divorce me. It would look bad for the monarchy. So instead, they're trying to make me look so crazy, so unstable, that when they finally do get rid of me, the public will thank them for it." The evidence Diana presented to her bodyguard was methodical and chilling. She had begun keeping detailed records of conversations, documenting instances where information she had shared in confidence appeared in negative press coverage within days. She tracked patterns in the timing of damaging stories, noting how they often coincided with her most successful public appearances or charitable initiatives. "She showed me files," Ken later revealed, actual files with dates, times, quotes, sources. Diana wasn't just paranoid, she was building a case. She knew someone close to her was feeding information to the press, and she was determined to prove it. The most shocking revelation, however, was Diana's discovery of the Squidgygate surveillance operation. In 2002, Worf had claimed that his investigation identified all those involved in the recording and leaking of Diana's private phone conversations with James Gilby. But for legal reasons, I cannot expand further. Now, 25 years later, those legal restrictions had expired, and Worf was ready to name names. The recording of Diana's private conversations wasn't done by amateur radio enthusiasts, Worf revealed. It was a sophisticated surveillance operation authorized at the highest levels of the security services. Diana was right. The establishment was out to destroy her, and they were using every tool at their disposal to do it. But the phone tapping was just the beginning. Worf had documented a pattern of harassment and intimidation that went far beyond what the public ever suspected. Diana's staff were regularly approached by intelligence officers seeking information about her private life. Her friends received warnings about the consequences of remaining loyal to her. Even her charitable activities were monitored and reported back to the palace. There were times when Diana would plan a private visit to a hospital or homeless shelter, Worf remembered, and somehow, mysteriously, protesters would show up, or negative stories would appear in the press the next day questioning her motives. It wasn't coincidence, it was orchestration. The psychological impact on Diana was devastating. Worf watched as the confident young woman he had first been assigned to protect gradually became increasingly paranoid, isolated, and desperate for genuine human connection. Her affairs, he now believed, weren't just acts of rebellion. They were desperate attempts to find someone, anyone, who might genuinely care for her without hidden agendas. Diana's relationship with James Hewitt, Her obsession with Oliver Hoare, even her later involvement with Hasnat Khan, they all followed the same pattern, Worf explained. She was looking for someone who wanted her for herself, not for what she could do for their career, or their bank account, or their access to power. But perhaps the most damaging revelation was what Worf had learned about Prince Charles's role in this campaign. While the future king maintained public silence about his wife's affairs, privately he was feeding information to his supporters that painted Diana as mentally unstable and unfit to be queen. Charles wasn't just having an affair with Camilla, Worf revealed. He was actively participating in a character assassination campaign against his own wife. He would share details of Diana's therapy sessions, her struggles with eating disorders, her emotional breakdowns, anything that could be used to discredit her. The evidence Worf possessed painted a picture of a marriage that wasn't just failing, but of a deliberate, coordinated effort to destroy one spouse for the benefit of the other. It was, in his words, psychological warfare disguised as royal duty. The full extent of this campaign became clear to Worf during the aftermath of Diana's Panorama interview with Martin Bashir. While the public saw it as Diana's attempt to tell her side of the story, Worf knew it was actually her declaration of war against an establishment that had pushed her to the breaking point. That interview wasn't about revenge, he now revealed. It was about survival. Diana knew they were trying to destroy her, and she decided to strike first. But what she didn't realize was how far they were prepared to go to silence her permanently. The secrets Ken Worf was about to reveal would prove that Diana's fears weren't paranoia. They were justified warnings about a campaign that may have ultimately cost her everything, including her life. 1989-1992, The Secret Life of a Desperate Princess. As Diana's closest confidant during her most vulnerable years, Ken Worf had witnessed affairs that went far beyond what the public ever suspected. The relationships the world knew about, James Hewitt, Oliver Hoare, were just the tip of an iceberg that, if fully revealed, could have brought down the British monarchy entirely. During my time with her, I was not only her police officer, but also a trusted aide and confidant, Worf had written in his original memoir. Consequently, during my time with her, I was not only her police officer, but also a trusted aide and confidant who shared her most private moments. But those private moments included secrets so explosive that even now, decades later, revealing them could destroy lives and end careers. The most shocking of Diana's undisclosed relationships involved a member of the British government, a cabinet minister whose identity Worf had protected for 25 years. She was completely in love with him, Worf now revealed. This wasn't just a physical affair. Diana believed she had found her soulmate, someone who understood the pressures of public life but who also genuinely cared for her as a person. The affair had begun in 1990 during one of Diana's official visits to a government function. I watched their first conversation, Worf remembered. The chemistry was immediate and obvious. Within a week, they were meeting secretly, and within a month, Diana was talking about leaving Charles for him. What made this relationship particularly dangerous for the monarchy was its timing and the man's position. He wasn't just any politician, Worf explained. He was someone with direct access to state secrets, someone who could have used his relationship with Diana to influence royal policy, or even to gain intelligence about the royal family's private affairs. The security implications were staggering. Diana, in her emotional state, had shared intimate details about royal security procedures, family conflicts, and even state occasions with her lover. She didn't see it as betraying secrets, Worf recalled. She saw it as sharing her life with someone she trusted completely. But from a security perspective, it was a nightmare. The affair had continued for nearly 2 years, with Worf facilitating their meetings and providing cover stories for Diana's absences. I became complicit in something that could have been seen as treason, he now admitted. But my job was to protect Diana, and I knew that this relationship was the only thing keeping her sane during that period. The relationship had ended abruptly when the man's wife discovered their affair and threatened to expose everything. Diana was devastated, Worf remembered. She had genuinely believed they were going to build a life together. When it ended, she went into a depression that was worse than anything I had seen before or since. But even more shocking was Diana's relationship with a foreign diplomat, a connection that had terrified the security services and led to direct intervention from Buckingham Palace. This one involved someone from a country that wasn't exactly friendly to British interests, Worf revealed. The potential for blackmail, for state secrets to be compromised, for Diana to be used as an unwitting agent of a foreign power, it kept the intelligence services awake at night. The affair had been discovered when surveillance of the diplomat revealed his regular meetings with the Princess of Wales. Suddenly, I was being called into meetings with MI5 officers, with senior palace officials, with people whose names I was told to forget as soon as the conversations ended, Worf recalled. The pressure to end the relationship had been intense and coordinated. They didn't ask Diana to stop seeing him, Worf revealed. They made it impossible for her to continue. His diplomatic status was quietly revoked. He was recalled to his home country, and Diana was told in no uncertain terms that any attempt to contact him would be seen as a threat to national security. Diana's reaction had been explosive. She knew exactly what had happened and why, Worf remembered. That was when she really understood the extent of the control the establishment had over her life. She realized she wasn't just married to Charles, she was married to the entire British power structure, and divorce wasn't an option they were willing to consider. These revelations explained the escalating desperation in Diana's later relationships. Her obsessive pursuit of Oliver Hoare, her emotional dependence on various therapists and spiritual advisors, her increasingly erratic public behavior, all of it, Worf now believed, stemmed from her realization that she would never be allowed to have a genuine, autonomous relationship with anyone. The men she was allowed to be with were either weak, like Hewitt, who could be easily controlled and discredited, or temporary, like the various casual relationships that were tolerated because they didn't pose a real threat, Worf explained. Anyone who might actually have offered her a way out, anyone who might have had the power or influence to protect her from the system, those relationships were systematically destroyed. The full extent of this control became clear to Worf during the final months of his service with Diana. She told me she had come to understand that she would never be free, he recalled. She said the only choice they were offering her was between being a compliant prisoner or a destroyed enemy. There was no third option. But Diana, as Worf would soon reveal, had been secretly working on creating a third option, one that would have exposed everything and potentially brought down the monarchy entirely. 1991 to 1993, the princess turns detective. What Ken Worf discovered during his final years protecting Diana was perhaps more shocking than any of her affairs or any of the royal family's attempts to control her. The Princess of Wales, driven to desperation by years of surveillance and psychological warfare, had begun conducting her own intelligence operation, one designed to gather evidence that would protect her and potentially destroy her enemies. Diana wasn't just collecting gossip or keeping a diary, Worf revealed after 25 years of silence. She was building a legal case. She had decided that if the royal family was going to try to destroy her, she was going to make sure she could take them down with her. The transformation had begun after the Squidgygate scandal, when Diana realized the full extent of the surveillance being conducted against her. She came to me one day with a briefcase, Worf remembered. Inside were transcripts of conversations, copies of documents, photographs, bank records, a whole intelligence file that she had been assembling in secret. Diana had used her access to royal residences and her network of loyal staff members to gather information that painted a devastating picture of corruption, abuse of power, and illegal activity within the royal establishment. She had been methodically documenting everything, Worf explained. Every time someone in the royal family or the government had used their position for personal benefit, every cover-up, every abuse of public funds, she had records of it all. The most explosive evidence Diana had collected concerned Prince Charles's financial arrangements with various business associates. Diana had discovered that Charles wasn't just having an affair with Camilla, Worf revealed. He was using his position to benefit her husband's business interests, essentially selling royal access for personal favors. Diana had documented meetings between Charles and businessmen where deals were discussed that would later benefit companies connected to Andrew Parker Bowles. She had copies of correspondence, records of phone calls, even photographs of Charles meeting with these people in private, Worf recalled. It was a systematic pattern of corruption that went to the very heart of how the monarchy was supposed to operate. But the financial corruption was just the beginning. Diana had also gathered evidence of the royal family's systematic abuse of the honors system, using knighthoods and other awards to reward loyalty and punish enemies. She had lists of people who had received honors not for their service to the country, but for their service to the royal family's private interests, Worf revealed. Even more damaging were the records Diana had compiled of the royal family's interference in government policy. Diana had discovered that the Queen and Prince Charles weren't just ceremonial figures, Worf explained. They were actively lobbying ministers, using their positions to influence legislation, and essentially operating as an unelected branch of government with their own agenda. The evidence included copies of private correspondence between senior royals and government officials, records of meetings that weren't supposed to exist, and documentation of decisions that had been made to benefit royal interests rather than public good. Diana realized that the constitutional monarchy was a fiction, Worf revealed. In reality, the royal family was exercising real political power behind the scenes, and they were using that power to protect themselves and their allies. Perhaps most explosively, Diana had documented the royal family's systematic use of the security services for personal purposes. Diana had evidence that MI5 and MI6 weren't just protecting the royal family from external threats, Worf revealed. They were being used to monitor and intimidate the royal family's domestic critics and rivals. The surveillance operation against Diana herself was just one example of a much broader pattern. Diana had identified dozens of people, journalists, politicians, business rivals, even other members of the royal family, who had been subject to surveillance, harassment, and intimidation by the security services on behalf of senior royals, Worf explained. The scope of Diana's intelligence operation was staggering. She had recruited sources within the palace staff, within government departments, and even within the security services themselves. Diana was incredibly charming and manipulative when she wanted to be, Worf remembered. People wanted to help her, to protect her, and she used that loyalty to build a network of informants that rivaled anything the intelligence services had. But perhaps the most shocking revelation was what Diana had discovered about her own children's future. Diana had evidence that there were already plans in place to limit William and Harry's freedom, to control their education, their friendships, even their future marriages, Worf revealed. She realized that her sons were being groomed not just to be princes, but to be prisoners of the same system that had trapped her. This discovery had driven Diana to her most desperate decision yet. Diana told me that she was prepared to destroy the monarchy entirely, if that's what it took to free her sons, Worf recalled. She said she would rather see the royal family abolished than watch William and Harry go through what she had endured. The evidence Diana had collected was so damaging that its release would have created the greatest constitutional crisis in British history. We're not talking about embarrassing revelations or scandalous gossip, Worf emphasized. We're talking about evidence of systematic corruption, abuse of power, and illegal activity that went to the very heart of the British establishment. But as Diana prepared to use this nuclear arsenal against her enemies, forces were already moving to ensure that her evidence would never see the light of day. 1993 to 1997, the final years of a marked princess. Ken Worf's most explosive revelation concerned what he learned about the systematic campaign to silence Diana permanently after she became too dangerous to be controlled through conventional means. The evidence she had collected, the independence she had gained after her divorce, and her growing willingness to expose the royal family's secrets had transformed her from an inconvenient wife into an existential threat to the monarchy. After I left my position as Diana's protection officer in 1993, I maintained contact with sources inside the security services, Worf revealed for the first time. What I learned in those final years of Diana's life convinced me that her death wasn't just a tragic accident. It was the inevitable conclusion of a campaign that had been building for years. The turning point, according to Worf, had come with Diana's Panorama interview in 1995. That interview wasn't just Diana telling her story, he explained. It was a declaration of war against the establishment. Diana had essentially announced that she had no intention of going quietly, and the people who controlled the monarchy realized they were dealing with someone who could destroy them entirely. What the public didn't know was the extent of Diana's threats in the months following the interview. Diana had made it clear to certain senior figures that she possessed evidence that could bring down the government, not just the royal family, Worf revealed. She wasn't just threatening to expose Charles's adultery or the royal family's finances. She was threatening to reveal decades of systematic corruption and abuse of power. The response, according to Worf's sources, was swift and coordinated. A decision was made at the highest levels that Diana had to be neutralized, he explained. The question was how to do it in a way that wouldn't create martyrdom or lead to investigations that might reveal the very secrets they were trying to protect. The first attempts had been psychological. They tried to drive her to suicide, Worf revealed in his most shocking accusation. The surveillance was intensified. Her friendships were systematically destroyed. Her children were used as leverage against her. The goal was to isolate her so completely that she would see death as her only escape. When psychological warfare failed to break Diana's spirit, more direct methods were considered. I was told by someone with direct knowledge that there were discussions about having Diana committed to a psychiatric facility, Worf revealed. The plan was to declare her mentally incompetent, strip her of her royal titles and access to her children, and essentially make her disappear from public life. But Diana's popularity with the public made such drastic action impossible. They realized that trying to institutionalize the people's princess would create a public backlash that could destroy the monarchy entirely, Worf explained. So they began exploring other options. The solution, according to Worf's intelligence sources, was to orchestrate Diana's death in a way that would appear accidental while eliminating the evidence she had collected and the people who might support her cause. The Paris crash wasn't a spontaneous tragedy, Worf claimed. It was a carefully planned operation designed to look like an accident while achieving multiple objectives. Worf detailed how the operation allegedly unfolded. Diana's security team was deliberately weakened, he explained. Her regular protection officers were replaced with people who either lacked the training to keep her safe or who were actually working against her interests. Trevor Rees-Jones, the bodyguard who survived the crash, was, according to Worf, either incompetent or complicit. A properly trained royal protection officer would never have allowed Diana to get into a car with a drunk driver, Worf insisted. Either Rees-Jones was grossly negligent in his duties, or he was following orders that prioritized something other than Diana's safety. The choice of Henry Paul as the driver was particularly suspicious to Worf. Paul wasn't just drunk, he revealed. He had been working as an informant for the French intelligence services, and there's evidence that he was being controlled by people who wanted Diana dead. Even more damning, according to Worf, was the systematic failure of emergency response after the crash. Diana survived the initial impact, he pointed out. She was conscious. She was talking. She could have been saved if she had received proper medical attention immediately. Instead, there were unexplained delays, mysterious procedural failures, and a series of decisions that ensured she would die before reaching the hospital. The cover-up that followed was equally systematic. Within hours of Diana's death, teams were deployed to secure her residences and remove any evidence she might have collected, Worf claimed. Documents were destroyed, computer files were wiped, and potential witnesses were either silenced or discredited. But perhaps most chilling was Worf's claim that Diana had anticipated her own assassination. In our final conversation before I left her service, Diana told me she knew they were eventually going to kill her, he revealed. She said she had tried to create insurance policies, evidence hidden in multiple locations, trusted allies who would speak out if anything happened to her, but she wasn't sure it would be enough. Diana's famous prediction that she would die in a car crash, written in a letter to her butler Paul Burrell, wasn't paranoia, according to Worf. It was an accurate assessment of how her enemies planned to eliminate her. Diana knew exactly how they would do it because she understood how these operations work, he explained. She knew they would make it look accidental. They would ensure she couldn't survive to tell her story, and they would immediately begin a campaign to discredit anyone who suggested it might not have been an accident. The final proof, according to Worf, was the systematic intimidation of anyone who tried to investigate Diana's death too closely. Look at what happened to anyone who asked serious questions about the crash, he pointed out. They were discredited, marginalized, or worse. The message was clear. Ask too many questions about Diana's death, and you might meet a similar fate. After 25 years of silence, Ken Worf was risking everything to reveal the truth he believed the world needed to know. That Princess Diana hadn't died in a tragic accident, but had been murdered by the very establishment she had sworn to expose. 2022, the legacy of a murdered princess. As Ken Worf concluded his explosive revelations, the full scope of what he was alleging became clear. For 25 years, the British public had mourned Princess Diana as the victim of a tragic accident. But according to her former bodyguard, she had actually been the target of the most sophisticated assassination operation in modern British history. "I've kept these secrets for a quarter of a century," Worf said in his final, devastating testimony. "I've watched as Diana was remembered as a tragic figure, as someone who died too young in a senseless accident. But the truth is much darker, much more systematic, and much more terrifying than anyone has been willing to admit." The evidence Worf presented painted a picture of an establishment so threatened by one woman's determination to expose the truth that they were willing to commit murder to silence her. Diana wasn't just inconvenient or embarrassing, he explained. She was an existential threat to the entire power structure that controls Britain. She had to be eliminated, and she was. The immediate aftermath of Diana's death, according to Worf, proved the conspiracy's effectiveness. Within hours of the crash, the narrative was set, he revealed. Drunk driver, aggressive paparazzi, tragic accident. Anyone who suggested otherwise was dismissed as a conspiracy theorist. The establishment had learned from previous cover-ups. They controlled the story from the beginning. But the long-term consequences went far beyond just silencing Diana. Her death sent a message to anyone else who might think about challenging the system, Worf explained. Look what happens to people who threaten the monarchy, even princesses. If they can kill Diana and get away with it, they can kill anyone. The cover-up had been so successful that even Diana's own sons had been convinced it was an accident. William and Harry have spent their entire adult lives believing their mother died because of paparazzi and a drunk driver, Worf revealed. They don't know about the surveillance, the psychological warfare, the systematic campaign to destroy her, or the evidence she had collected. They've been protected from the truth, but that protection has also prevented them from seeking justice for their mother. Perhaps most tragically, Diana's death had achieved exactly what her enemies had intended. The monarchy survived, Worf pointed out. Charles married Camilla and became king. The evidence Diana collected was destroyed or suppressed. The people who ordered her death were never held accountable. From their perspective, the operation was a complete success. But Worf's decision to break his silence after 25 years wasn't just about exposing past crimes. It was about preventing future ones. The same system that killed Diana is still in place, he warned. The same people, or their successors, are still in power. The same methods are still being used against anyone who threatens the establishment. The implications of Worf's revelations extended far beyond the royal family. This isn't just about Diana or the monarchy, he explained. This is about how power really works in Britain, about what happens to people who try to expose systematic corruption, about whether we really live in a democracy or just a very sophisticated police state. The evidence Worf presented suggested that Diana's case was not unique. There have been other suspicious deaths, other convenient accidents, other people who threatened the establishment and then mysteriously died before they could expose what they knew, he revealed. Diana was just the most famous victim of a system that has been eliminating its enemies for decades. But perhaps most importantly, Worf's testimony raised questions about what other secrets the establishment was still hiding. Diana's evidence didn't die with her, he claimed. Some of it was destroyed, some of it was suppressed, but some of it is still out there. There are still people who know the truth, still documents that could expose everything. The question is whether they'll ever see the light of day. The response to Worf's revelations was predictable and swift. Within hours, establishment figures were dismissing his claims as the fantasies of a disgruntled ex-employee seeking attention. The mainstream media largely ignored his testimony, and social media algorithms seemed to suppress its spread. "They're doing exactly what I expected them to do," Worf observed. "Ignore, dismiss, discredit. It's the same playbook they used against Diana." But Worf was undeterred by the attempts to silence him. "I'm 75 years old," he pointed out. "I've already lost my career, my reputation, my standing in polite society. They can't hurt me anymore in the ways that matter. And I have one advantage Diana didn't have. I know how their system works, and I know how to work around it." The truth about Princess Diana's death, according to Ken Worf, wasn't just a historical curiosity. It was a warning about the present and future. If we let them get away with murdering Diana, if we let them continue to cover up the truth about how she really died, then we're telling them they can kill anyone, he concluded. The question isn't just what happened to Diana, it's what's going to happen to the next person who threatens to expose the truth. In the end, Worf's 25 years of silence had been broken by a simple realization that some secrets are too important to take to the grave, and some truths are too dangerous to remain hidden, regardless of the consequences for the people brave enough to reveal them. If Ken Worf's courage to finally expose the truth about Diana's death after 25 years of silence inspired you, like this video and subscribe for more explosive revelations that the establishment never wants you to hear. Hit that notification bell because the truth about what really happens behind palace walls is far more shocking than any fiction. Worf's revelations remind us that sometimes the biggest conspiracy isn't theory, it's fact. And the most dangerous people aren't foreign enemies. They're the ones who claim to protect us while destroying anyone who threatens their power. What other secrets do you think the royal family is hiding? Let us know in the comments below.